Hello all. In this video, we'll be dealing with the fourth chapter of the environmental science syllabus. Now, this chapter is on managing soil and land. So, we'll be talking about this chapter in 7 different topics. The first one is where we'll be talking about soil conservation techniques. So, we'll see what is soil erosion and then how we can control it using different types of techniques. Then we will move on to land reforms, where we'll be looking at the meaning and the different measures that have been enforced in India for land reforms. Third, we'll be looking at the integrated rural development. What is the meaning of this? What is the objective of it? What are the different schemes that have been implemented under the integrated rural development project in India? Fourth one, we'll also look at the role of women and community in conservation. Then we'll be going on to how we can combat deforestation. Again, what are the different methods by which we can, try to stop or reduce deforestation? How we can manage overgrazing in the forest, that is forest grazing. And finally, we'll also look at what are the different alternatives that are there to timber. So soil is one of the most important natural resources because it supports life. But then there's a huge strain on it because of the rapid population growth, because of industrialization, urbanization. So all of this is causing the soil to get depleted. Not just the amount of soil in a particular area, even the quality of soil. So when we see the soil, or when we talk about the soil profile, this is the soil profile. That is, these are the layers that are present in soil. Now when we see the layers of soil, the topmost layer is the O layer, or the organic layer, the layer which is really rich in organic matter. And then we have the surface A, or which is also called as the topsoil, which is comprised of minerals plus organic matter plus all the organisms. Now when we talk about soil erosion is where the top fertile layer gets removed from a particular area. So when we talk about soil erosion, we are basically talking about the removal of both O and A layers. These layers, these really rich fertile layers, are getting removed from a particular area due to several agents. It could be due to rain, wind, due to human activities, any of the above. But then the problem is that these are the fertile layers, these are the layers which are supporting plant growth, and they are getting removed, washed off from a particular area. Soil erosion is one of the major concerns that are there with respect to conservation of soil. So when we say that we want to use it in a rational manner, we want to use the natural resources rationally or equitably without degrading them, we want to have a sustainable use of soil, the major hindrance that comes over there is soil erosion. So we'll talk about what are the different management techniques, or how can we manage soil erosion in a better manner? What are the different control strategies that are there? So what is the problem with soil erosion? See, we have already seen the causes. We know that, deforestation or overgrazing or any other activity that is related to urbanization or industrialization or population growth, for example, over mining can be a cause of soil erosion. Improper usage of land is a cause of soil erosion. But what exactly is the effect? Why are we worrying about it so much? So we already saw that the top layer is being removed. So there's loss of fertility that happens in a particular region. Secondly, it affects the water holding capacity. There are no plants which can grow in a particular region. Automatically, water holding capacity of that soil goes down, and you also have silting of water bodies because all of the soil in a particular region is removed and it goes and gets deposited in a water body, and it causes silting of water bodies. So these are some of the effects that can happen due to soil erosion. There are much more bigger effects like desertification, which we will deal with in a different video. But the reason we need to control soil erosion is mainly because it causes fertility loss in a particular region. So what are the different control strategies? The first one is terrace farming. Terrace farming is something that we see mainly in the hilly regions. It can be followed anywhere, but then hilly regions is where we usually see, wherein the fields or the entire land has been cut at right angles. So you can see some sort of steps that have been formed into the land itself, and these steps or these terraces, which we call, are the areas where agriculture is being carried out. So the agriculture is carried out on the flat surface, and this is really good because it reduces the runoff of the water. It reduces the water from getting flowing too much, thus it reduces erosion. The second one is contour farming. Contour farming is similar to the terrace farming. It's just that here you don't cut at right angles. Instead, you are tilling the the sloped land along the lines of the elevation. So if the land is having a slope like this along the elevation of the land, if you're growing, if you're tilling the land and having farming over there, or if you're plowing the land in that according to the contour of the region, that's what we call as contour farming. Again, here it helps prevent soil erosion because it acts as a reservoir. These areas act as a reservoir to catch the rainwater, to retain the rainwater. So it ensures that the water doesn't flow down taking the soil along with it. Instead, it goes into the soil. The third one is dry farming. Dry farming is mainly followed in the arid regions or semi-arid areas where the rainfall is not very good, where they have rainfall in the rainy season, but then the rest of the year is really dry. So in these regions, you don't have irrigation, you do not use irrigation, you do the farming with the help of moisture that is retained within the soil. So whatever moisture is there in the soil is what you are using. That is called, if that's the technique that you're employing, then that we call as the dry farming. Dry farming mainly ensures that you use drought resistant crops, or you are having some sort of mechanisms in place, like you have applying a fine surface of mulch or the crop residue, such that the water is retained in the soil. You are protecting that soil moisture from evaporation. That's what you're trying to do. That's what we call as dry farming. Tree planting definitely is a method for controlling erosion because the roots of the trees will hold the water in place. So transplanting the tree seedlings itself, it's usually done in areas where the forest was harvested or it was damaged due to some fire or disease. In such areas, we go for tree planting, ensuring that the trees are going to prevent the erosion, or the organic matter in the soil is increased, and that not only prevents or reduces erosion, it also reduces pollution and provides a natural habitat for the biodiversity. The next one we have is the formation or use of bunds. Now, bunds are basically barriers. So these barriers could be in the agricultural land. You could be making it of stone, it could be made of soil, or like what's shown over here, it could be made up of the crop residue itself. So these bunds are basically acting like a barrier to control the rainwater. It allows the water to get infiltrated into the soil and thus prevents erosion. Something very similar to bunds are the gullies. Gullies are trenches or ditches, or channels which are dug into the soil. So these channels are again cut into the soil so that rainwater does not keep flowing. It gets collected in that channel, and after a heavy rain or after a downpour, that channel will now get filled with rainwater, and that can later be used for irrigation or for any other kind of purpose. So gullies and bunds are basically methods where you are trying to channelize or take the rainwater and use it for other purposes. We can even have windbreaks, or windbreaks are also called as shelter belts. Shelter belts, like the names suggests, or windbreak like the name suggests, is basically a row or number of rows of trees or shrubs which are planted at right angle to the prevailing wind. So if the wind is coming in over here, if say this is the direction of the wind, that wind is now going to get broken. The flow of wind is going to get broken because of these trees, which prevents the soil erosion in the nearby farms or in the nearby fields. So this is very important for reducing the velocity of the winds. Now, when we see the soil conservation techniques, there are different types of techniques, but then you can, group them under three major headers. The first one is land use management. Now, soil conservation techniques are basically used for protecting the soil from the impact of the rain or from the impact of the wind. You are ensuring that more water goes inside the soil and it doesn't cause soil erosion. That's what you're trying to do, to decrease soil erosion, to decrease the volume and velocity of overland flow of water. That's what you're trying to do in these techniques. So the first method, or the first way in which you can conserve soil is by land use management. Now, land use management is basically using a land within its capabilities. So you could have, see, there are different types of land use. You could have crop land, pasture land, wood land, wildlife land, recreational land, different types. You can use the land for different purposes. But what does land use management mean? It means you manage and you use the land, you develop the land resources in such a way, in the rural and in the urban areas, in such a way that you are, even when you are converting from one form to the other form, you are not posing a risk to the particular land. So using the land within its capabilities. See, there could be one land which is a crop land. When you're converting it into land where an urban land, you ensure that the soil erosion does not happen. You ensure that there are techniques in place which retain the rainwater. So that is what we call as land use management. Whenever land is being converted from one use to the other, ensuring that it is susceptible to erosion at that time. So you are ensuring that the land use management is being done properly. You are developing the land resources, you are converting from one form to the other without harming or without hampering the land. That is what we call as land use management. The second one is using vegetative or biological practices. Now, vegetative practices are basically the cropping practices. So, you use different types of cropping techniques. For example, crop rotation or alternate cropping, or like we saw in the previous slide, using wind breaks or strip cropping. So, you use different types of vegetative practices to ensure that the soil is getting conserved. And the third one are the mechanical practices, which are basically engineering measures. So you can see over here, the first one what we have is a strip cropping, where you are using alternate strips of row crops and intertilled crops at right angles. Basically, you are using different types of crops. You are using different rows of crops, ensures that the soil is not getting eroded very easily. It's also good for the fertility of the soil. Or even contour farming is a type of method. It's a type of cropping practice which is a vegetative measure, or terrace farming like shown over here, or using the cover crops. All these are examples of the vegetative practices. Mechanical practices are basically engineering measures like we saw earlier, using bunds or digging gullies or any other, or even terrace farming can be considered as an engineering measure. These are examples of mechanical practices. So mechanical, vegetative practices and land use management are the different soil conservation techniques. Now the next part we have in your syllabus is the land reforms. See, land reforms are basically the different measures or reforms that have been taken in India to which are discussing the various changes that are happening, that have happened in India with relation to land. That's what you call as land reform. So basically this talks about the redistribution of land from the rich to the poor, or anybody who's not having land. You are redistributing the land from the rich to the poor with the aim of increasing the productivity. That is the main aim, ensuring that the productivity of the land increases, and also ensuring that poverty decreases. Both of these are the aims that are in place for implementing any kind of land reform. So in India there have been multiple phases of land reforms, and in India it's very, very important because we are an agrarian economy. We have a lot of land which is used for agriculture. Not only that, we have a large quantity of rural population which is below the poverty line. We have unequal distribution of land. There are rich have a lot of land, and there's a huge section of poor people who don't have any land at all. So in India, it has always been a top priority at the time of independence and even in the later decades to ensure that there are land reforms. So in India, there have been 4 phases. I have shown it over here. The first phase, which is the longest phase, was from 1950 to 1972, which was mainly focusing on the abolition of intermediaries like the zamindars or the rent collectors, to abolish them so that the middlemen don't make money out of it. Second one was to reform the tenancy laws, that is to ensure or to give permanent heritable rights to people who are actually working on the field, and redistributing the land using land ceilings. So these were the major aims that were taken into consideration during the first 22 years. The next one was from 1972 to 1985, where the focus was on bringing the uncultivated land into cultivation, because the number of people was increasing and the demands were increasing. There was a lot of uncultivated land. How could we convert that into good fertile land was the next phase, focusing on. The third phase was from 1985 to 1995, wherein the focus was on conservation of soil and water. So development of wasteland, development of desert area, how do we ensure more of irrigation measures? This is what was taken care in the third phase. The fourth phase, which is from 1995 onwards, it has been to improve the land revenue administration, to continue the land legislation, especially the land records, ensuring that land records are maintained properly. This is what we have been focusing on from 1995 onwards. So these are the different land reforms in place in India. Overview syllabus talks about integrated rural development. Now, integrated rural development is, puts emphasis on the involvement of the less privileged strata. So, it in India we started a program, or we implemented a program called as the Integrated Rural Development Program. This was launched in the year 1978, and it was kept on going till 1999. After that, we have rebranded it. So we do have that program now, but then it is rebranded into different schemes. So this IRDP, or Integrated Rural Development Program, is basically a self-employment program. The main objective of it is to ensure self-employment amongst the rural population, amongst the rural youth, to raise their income generation capacity, to enhance their living standards, to provide subsidies or loans or some kind of credits to the target population. So the target population over here are the artisans who know some particular craft work, are the people who are, the laborers who are working in the rural region, or even the farmers, who are on the margins. Even for them, these schemes are intended. So the target population needs to come up in life, to their living standards have to be improved, their income generation capacity has to be improved. These are the main objectives of the Integrated Rural Development Program. So under this, we have different schemes that have been taken. I have just put up a few over here. There are many more. Some of them include the training of the rural youth so that they are, capable of self-employment, or the development of women and children in the rural areas, ensuring that there are sanitation programs. Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, you might have heard of these. This is also for self-employment, or scheme for the rural artisans to ensure that they are being provided with the improved toolkits. These are some of the schemes. But in your syllabus, they have mainly focused on the social forestry and community forestry, which we will talk about in detail. So social forestry is where we use the unused land, the fallow land, the barren land, which is not having any cultivation. We use that for growing fast growing trees. We want to grow trees that, come up really quickly, so that those trees, so on the fallow land, you start growing trees which grow quickly, and those trees are then either used for fodder or they are used for fuel by the local community. This is what we call as social forestry. So you harvest those trees for the fuel wood, so that the deeper forests which are present are safeguarded from exploitation. That is what we call as social forestry. One type of social forestry, so there are many types, but one type of social forestry is community forestry. Community forestry is wherein the local people partake, to safeguard a particular forest. It may be a forest that they have planted, or it may be the forest in general, but the local community participation is there to safeguard the forest, to improve the forest. That is what we call as the community forestry. So these are two schemes specifically mentioned under the Integrated Rural Development Program. In your syllabus is to know the role of women and community in conservation. So in general, the role of women is very, very important in bringing up a community, or in conservation of the natural resources. The reason is because women are the ones who are directly playing, or managing the natural resources at the grassroots level, because they play a very critical role. They are involved in usage of water. In some cases, they are the ones who bring the fuel wood. In many communities, women are the ones who are preparing the food, who are collecting the food. So the role of women is very, very important in conservation of natural resources. If we ensure literacy, that is, if we make them literate, if we make them educated, and we empower the women in any community, there have been reports which show that this leads to increased food production. The reason, because they adopt, once they are literate, once they are educated and they are empowered, they adopt a scientific approach to understanding things, and that has helped, or that has shown to increase food production in several countries. So even in India, we need to ensure that women are being empowered. They are being given an active role to conserve the natural resources, or in this case, conserving the soil, conserving the land. Because women do take part in jobs, like they go for daily wage laborers, or they may be involved in trading, in selling, or producing the vegetables, the fruits and other compounds, or they may even be farmers. We do have women farmers as well. So ensuring that they are literate and empowered will help us to manage the natural resources in a better manner. We even have several data where the forest conservation has been initiated by village women. Like for example, the chipko movement, women played a major role in it. So they were the ones who ensured that the trees were not cut. Even community, when we see community based conservation is also very, very important, and it is being utilized in India because community will get actively involved. In fact, some control is given to the members of the local communities, and they are the ones who help in conservation of a particular forest or a particular land. For example, nature worship or having sacred groves is an example where people do not cut down the trees in a particular region because they worship those trees, or they consider that area to be very sacred. So even that is an example by which we can involve the community in conserving a particular region. The next we have in your syllabus is combating deforestation. Now, deforestation is where we have, incessantly cutting down trees, destruction of an indigenous forest or a woodland for economic value. So you use those trees for converting that land into some other purpose, or you use that timber itself is being used for some particular economic value. The main causes of deforestation is because of urbanization, it is because of mining, it is because of having expanded infrastructure. We want to build dams, we want to build roads, that again is a cause for deforestation. Agricultural expansion, we need more food. For growing more crops we need more area, so expansion of agriculture. Raw materials for industries, all of these are the reasons why forests are being cut down across the world. It's not just India, everywhere. Even shifting agriculture, which is a practice where some communities cut down trees, then they grow some crops over there, they leave that area, go to another area, cut down the trees over there. That's called as shifting agriculture. It is seen in some of the states in India as well. So these are some reasons why deforestation is so rampant, and we need to control it, because if there are no trees, we know that it can cause a range of environmental effects. It can cause a cascade of effects for which will ultimately harm humans and even the biodiversity. So the first easiest way is to stop the deforestation. We have to avoid it. We have to look for alternatives, and we need to stop cutting trees first. Secondly, we need to start planting trees. So reforestation, restoring, regenerating forests is important. Energy plantation is the next part, where you grow species of trees or shrubs that can be harvested in a short time, and which can be used as firewood, or which can be converted into fuel like ethanol. So there's a dual role over there. You are growing trees which can be harvested quickly, and they are usually going to protect. When there are trees growing over there, they're going to protect the lands from erosion as well, from floods as well. It also generates rural employment. So energy plantation is very useful because you get the trees, they grow quickly, you can use them for whatever you want. Secondly, they protect from erosion, and third, they generate employment. So energy plantation is something that is being looked into actively. The fourth one is to harvest the forest for non-timber products. So instead of using the forest for wood, avoiding the wood usage, instead of wood, you use the forest for other products like nuts or seeds or mushrooms or berries, or the foliage for medicinal plants. So instead of cutting down the big trees and using the timber, you use other products from the forest that will also improve the rural economy, the markets. It will keep the traditional knowledge alive as well. So this also helps us in combating the deforestation. The next part, these two what have been written are the very important ones. So we need to explore alternatives. We have to look for alternative sources of livelihood. There are many tribal people who derive their basic requirements like food, fodder, fuel from the forests. We need to provide them with an alternative livelihood. You can't suddenly go to the tribals and tell them stop cutting forests, because you have done enough damage to the forest. You cannot tell them not to use. You need to provide them an alternative source. Only then can we stop cutting down the forest. We have to teach them skills like masonry or carpentry or pottery, handicrafts, anything that will help them to sustain themselves. These have to be taught to them so that they have lesser economic dependence on the forest. They are also being, they don't overuse the forest or degrade the forest. You need to provide them with alternative sources of livelihood. There has to be a change in the consumption pattern. This is happening, but happening at a slow rate, but we need to continue doing it. What does that mean? You consume less. That's the easiest way. So you cut down the greenhouse gas emissions because you're consuming less of the timber. You don't need to cut down forests. For one of the examples could be recycling the paper. So we'll look at that in detail in the next slide. So you recycle the paper, you balance the wood that is taken out. So if you're cutting a number of trees, you ensure that new trees are also being, planted immediately. You buy used wood products, reuse the wood, recycle the wood in furniture and in flooring, and you buy less wood. So consuming pattern needs to be changed. Only then can we actually bring about some, effect of deforestation, reduce the effect of deforestation. The sixth topic that we have in your syllabus is managing forest grazing. Now, overgrazing is a problem that is, severe grazing that happens for extended periods of time. And this is happening because there's not enough recovery period. You don't allow the plants, the grasses to grow before that grazing is happening. And this is when the number of livestock is exceeding the carrying capacity of that land, or the same patch of land is being used for grazing. The cattle owners are too poor to stall feed the cattle. They are not able to provide the food to the cattle in this way. These are all the causes of overgrazing, and overgrazing is very, very dangerous because it reduces the productivity of a land, and eventually it causes the land to get converted into a desert, which is called as desertification. So we need to stop forest grazing, and that has been specifically listed out even in our national forest policy. The control of overgrazing can be done by rotating the grazing areas, choosing different grazing areas so that you give enough time for the grasses to grow, encouraging stall feeding in areas where the livestock volume is very high, and ensuring that you raise a small herd of good breed so that you don't have too many animals over there, and you have a small bunch of good breed that is going to give you whatever economic value you need. In our national forest policy which was given in 1988, there they have a specific clause which talks about providing sufficient fodder, fuel and pasture. Why? Because you need to regulate the grazing in forest areas, and you have to involve the community for this. So ensuring that individuals or institutions, they get motivated to undertake tree farming or fodder plants or grasses in the degraded land or the denuded land. That is also one of the ways that the forest policy has told. Basically ensuring that there is stability of the environment and we are able to maintain the ecological balance. These are the different aims that have been listed out with respect to grazing, with respect to control of forest grazing in the national forest policy. The last part we have is to look for alternatives to timber. So we use timber in fuel, in construction, in all of these arenas. We need to look for alternatives. For example, instead of timber, in case of fuel, we could go for using dung cakes, cow dung cakes, or dried wood, or look for solar cookers, or we use pellets from sawdust or waste of the sawmilling, or rice husk, or the or oil cakes, or in some cases we can even go for kerosene, but then again it's a fuel which has other problems. So, or even we could go for biogas. One way or the other, we need to provide alternatives for timber being used as a fuel. These are some of the alternatives that I have listed out. Timber is also used in construction material, especially in the cold countries. So we need to go for other alternatives like concrete or metal units which have thermal treatment, or the door and window panels need to be used of metal. So we need to look for alternatives to the timber in construction as well. In railways, wooden sleepers are used, and instead of wooden sleepers, we can maybe shift to concrete or even metal. In furniture is a place where we are using a lot of wood. Instead of that, we should shift to iron furniture or steel furniture. We could even go for plastic furniture. So we need to go for furniture which, or nowadays we even have furniture that is made of recycled material. Waste material is then recycled and then we are using it as furniture. So we have to look for alternatives to timber even in furniture. Lastly, instead of paper, we can recycle the paper or make paper made of reeds. Instead of cutting down trees, look for the reeds or bagasse, or you recycle the paper. You can even do it 4 to 5 times. Use scrap paper, use to make cardboard or packaging industry. So there are different alternatives that are in place, but we need to make them popular so that timber or wood is not being cut down. So these were the different topics that have been listed out in your chapter 4. Basically, how can we reduce soil erosion? How can we ensure that the deforestation is being reduced by providing different alternatives? Hope it was useful to all of you. See you all in the next video lecture as well. Thank you.